And when people often are like, oh my gosh, how can you write about sex magic? And, you know, about like, isn't it dangerous? What if that gets in the wrong hands? And if somebody like there's a leaking energy that happens if you're not doing it for the highest good, it doesn't have the same potential that magic does when you do. You know, by law of karma and other laws, when you do black magic or magic that's not in consent or aligned, it really does come back around. So the question that you had, number 2, was about universal prayers. You know, and number 3, what you brought up is, hey, we're starting this potential new relationship. Any suggestions? And so I want clarification. You're actually looking for a suggestion of a prayer to do sex magic with this person, or just intention before the date, or clarify that a little bit.
There was talk of doing a photo shoot because we did some online photo sharing, and it's like we're both laughing at how difficult it is to take pictures of both of you. So I don't know if we're going to be nude and taking photo shoots on our first date, but I definitely want that to be a sacred thing. That's the most we would do, I think. But yeah, intentions and prayers for just starting off in a sacred way with somebody, and then, you know, furthermore, if we do a photo shoot, I guess what kind of sacred prayers could keep us comfortable together.
Beautiful. And, you know, photo shoot, it's kind of like there's 64 tantric arts. Actually, there's infinite numbers, but, you know, it's said in the Kama Sutra that there's 64 tantric arts that include like flower arranging and you know, singing and mockery and different things. And then modern times, like when people are like, I'm doing web design, or I'm doing, you know, it's like, those are also tantric arts. What makes it tantric is the intention you bring to whatever the art is, right? So I love that you're like, ooh, our first date, we're going to do some creativity together, right? You're painting with light. Yeah. And what I recommend, whether you're doing, you know, whether it's your first date or your, you know, like a regular date that you weekly or regular, or you're doing any new project, is to take a moment and drop in together and say, let's pause, you know, before we get all in our, you know, especially photography, because it's so ego confronting. You start going like, how do I look? You know, and you start now you're in the ego, now you're in your mind, and you're totally out of the heart. It's like, ooh, how do we bring the heart into the art? And that's by stopping, set the camera down, you know, dropping down, breathing together and saying, let's just check in, you know, drop in, breathe. And then what's our intention? And in that moment, you know, because even right now, if we came up with a great prayer, if it wasn't plugged into the now, what's moving through your heart now, it's only a fraction of how powerful it is. You know, when we pray, we want to, it's like the prayer field exists beyond time and space, but the nexus of where the heart is in that moment, in the combination of other hearts, that is the most potency that you can have for prayer, is what's my truth in the moment. And so to actually just hold space for each other to share, you know, and often I will say, like, what's the highest frequency of love that we can access in this moment that's authentic? You know, because a lot of us, like right now in this circle, we could all like remember back a time in which we were exalted or in ecstasy, but that's a memory. Memories exist in the mind. It's different than what's authentically here right now, you know, before us. And so just being like, let's drop into the now, and then whatever you co-create from there, that's where the real magic is. Yeah.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
I love it.
I do too. And it's, I love that you asked this question, because it's kind of there's an irony with this main character is doing a tribute to ancient sacred prostitution, which is deep history, and it's a written text. And I remember, you know, just as a theater director, there's like, you're fumbling, you don't know your lines, kind of like I was fumbling through reading the script. Like that was just like, oh, I haven't read this in a while and I'm fumbling through it. But then you get rehearsed and you memorize it and you can kind of deliver it. But then there's a transcendental level. So it's like, you don't know the script, you know the script, and then you go beyond the script. And the real magic happens on stage, in performance, in ritual, when we go beyond what's scripted, and you can start to access the real transmission. Yeah. So there's nothing, I want to say there's nothing wrong inherently with memorized prayers or invocations or things that you say like mantras over and over. It's just, you don't want to be in the mantra, you want to be in the magic that's beyond it. Other reflections?
I have a comment and a question. My comment first is about I think the beautiful relationship between what is art, and I think I would love for you to talk more about it. That usually people define art, and like people that study art define art. Beginning has like copying, and there is this amazing Brazilian theoretical critic of art that she defines art as a state of magic, that you go to the unknown and you bring something within. And I think it's so bold just to write about doing this ritual on stage. Is like, it's a very bold and very honor space, as a sacred prostitute, like touch my heart in a way that really you need a lot of lining to be in this stage, in the field of art and doing that. So I think it's really interesting how you mix art and magic and rituals and how it is related.
I want to share that one of my inspirations as an artist, I already mentioned last night that Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist Way, is one of my all-time teachers when I was kind of young and lost. The Artist Way really put me onto a tantric path with that, without even knowing, that had the connection between art and tantra. But the other artist I want to tip my hat to is Ani DeFranco. So Ani is a lyricist like no other. Like her poetry is phenomenal. And she, speaking of, in the book piece that I just read, I talked about Veronica Monet's teacher was, transmitted to her that her pussy is like a muscle. And it's a muscle that grows stronger. Ani DeFranco says, my cunt is like a wound that won't heal. And that's just, what a powerful image. And Ani DeFranco also says on art, which is something that I hold near and dear. When people ask me to define art, I quote, art is why I get up in the morning, but my definition doesn't end there. I don't think it's fair that I'm living for something I can't define. And the truth is we can't define it. It's how the creator touches us and moves through us, and we become creators. Like the creative impulse is basically the kiss of God. And it's like, oh, I must create this. And that then puts us in touch with our nature as creators. And so it is a very mystical experience. There's a God force that moves through us when we're in our creativity. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. Last night, Sarah was with me in a course called Money as Your Tantric Lover. And during that course, one of the 10 principles that I teach is about this like energetic flow, getting into the flow to resequence alchemically your relationship to money. And I'm gonna, hear this intimate mastermind just kind of showed up. So I'm going to share with you a practice that I've done when I taught a year-long mastermind on money as your lover. And one of the rituals that we did was to self-pleasure with money. And it's, you know, it's true that we can do NLP, or we can do various like cognitive behavioral like reframes, and, you know, to try to redefine our relationship to anything. But there is no more direct line to framing than, or, you know, releasing limiting beliefs, or, you know, creating new associations than orgasm. Like, you know, they've done these scans and they look at what the brain looks like under orgasm, and it's like fireworks in every area, you know, like they've identified, oh, we orgasm, we go into this God, you know, place of the brain. It's not just the pleasure center, it's everywhere. And so the neural networks go off, and you can download new neuroplasticity faster through orgasm than anything else. So to self-pleasure with money in becoming like a tantric lover, and again, this has to have this inner integrity. The rest of the course, the reason this is step number, you know, like this is the 10th principle, is because the other 9 principles, you know, really talk about sufficiency, and we have to let go of our greed, and we have to let go of money being evil, and various other ways in which money, we have to untangle all of those negative, not just associations, but the conditioning and the program and the bondage, the way in which we are not free around money. We have to untangle that first. And then you can go into, let me reassociate. Because what you don't want to be anchoring in through ceremony, partial, you know, somewhat healthy upgrade. You know, it's nice, progressively you can make progress, have a better relationship with money. But if you really want to have the liberating satori that is possible, so that you're not, that you're in a total phase shift, and money isn't what it used to be for you, and now it's empowering, and it's sufficient, and it's, you know, you're in abundance and not all the other story, then, you know, some of the ways that those in female bodies I know have done is put money, put actual cash, you know, in a bottle, and then made love to the bottle, like put it inside of them. You know, there's these kinds of ceremonies, and you can use your creativity about what that looks like. You know, wrapped it around their dildos and put condoms over the money inside of them. Like you can get really creative with this. But then the next level of it, because we used to actually have an in-person class too. I had a goddess do this on stage, like a stage here in my house, but it was witnessed, you know, so a small group of a coven, you know, powerful witches that were like, hey, we're going to witness you in rewriting this. And so, you know, there's various degrees, you know, like you said, it's hard. Last night you were talking about, well, I can change my relationship to money, but my community hasn't changed their relationship. So how do I do that? Well, you know, this is definitely a complex theme in the web of life. And if you want to take it to that next level, you take it to the tribe. Thank you for asking. That's really out there. And I recently got, I don't know if I'd say shade, but, you know, I did a podcast with Dane Thomas called, you know, he's got like a money show, and he was teasing me. He's like, I heard about you and your witchy money rituals. And he was actually like, wow, there's actually something to it. So people will hear about this, and out of context, it sounds wild, but in context, it's part of a personal evolution. And you never want to do something for the sake of doing if it doesn't feel authentic to who you are and what real magic is. And real magic comes from that sovereign alignment. And if it's true to you, you do it not, oh, this is what KD prescribed, so I'm going to try this. It's, you know, it's going to fall flat. It has to feel really soul ordained.
I just had a quick question about, you know, the line where you say that the prostitutes will take the fire out of the soldiers and kind of like serving a higher good to humanity. I was just curious, what other theme, you know, how, if you can kind of expand on that, because it seems like an important theme throughout human history to me.
So clarify the question. I know the part you're talking about, but what are you asking?
Well, in terms of, you know, so we've got so many debates now about should prostitution be legal? And my view has always been that it does serve a purpose in terms of helping people cope emotionally, people who otherwise may not be able to find a partner, find an outlet. And it's kind of hitting on that topic of using, you know, even if someone is paying to be able to connect with someone on an emotional level and help create more peace and love in the world in a way. It just seems like an important topic that when I read it, I was like, that's kind of a whole subject in and of itself in the book, and it's just really quickly mentioned. But to me, it seemed like it doesn't really have much to relate in the book. But it seems like an important topic.
Yeah, so I think what you're asking, it's an inquiry about how is prostitution a sacred role in, you know, in humanity's evolution.
Yeah, that'd be a good way to say it.
You know, it's interesting because it's like, this book is a poly kinky tantric queer love story, and it's not about prostitution, and yet there's a sub-theme in there pointing to how these regular sessions that are sex-centered can be so healing, and not just healing, but enlightening. And in a sense, the two characters in this book have set up what would look like almost a weekly, you know, session for that you would with a sacred prostitute. You know, it's like, okay, we're going into this ceremony, and one of my mentors, so Tracy Elise is the mystic mother of the goddess Phoenix Temple, which you may or may not know has a very controversial history, where there was a massive police raid, and it really brought to light the two subjects. One subject being, you know, legalizing prostitution, and how prostitution is not legal, and that's what she was. 30 people associated with that temple were indicted for prostitution-related charges, and she was also, you know, imprisoned for it. And then but she, in the courts, valiantly, intelligently argued for not legalizing prostitution, but this is my church. This is about religious freedom. You know, what I'm doing here, this wasn't, you know, a brothel, this was a temple. And she argued it like it's never been argued before in modern times. And, you know, I believe she's still in the appellate process of that. But the distinction, there is a rift in our professional tantra community, because there's a lot of tantrikas who are doing work that is, I would say, in the gray area of prostitution, you know, or sex for money. It's in the gray area. And so a lot of the tantrikas are like, oh, I'm doing this tantra and it's healing and it's for enlightenment. It's not, you know, sex for money. And yet the argument is sex for money should be legal. It is beneficial. It is valuable. This in and of itself is a cause and an important, you know, conversation. And I think it's getting more and slowly. It goes through cycles. It gets more attention, then it gets forgotten. And But right now it's a hot topic because of SESTA and FOSTA and other, almost like we had a big regression a few years ago, and we're trying to reclaim some ground. But legalizing prostitution, is basically forbidding it's a prohibition of an act between consenting adults. And so as that theme is being argued, a lot of the tantrikas say, I don't want anything to do with that theme because I don't want to be seen as a prostitute. Like, what we're doing is something other. This is sometimes it's more like sex education, or it's more like priest and priestess, rituals. But if we scoot back and we look at the whole, and we say, hey, we want to liberate humanity's and potentiate humanity's access to eros, both of those are equally important. And I don't have a huge separation in my worldview. All of us have some sexual healing to do at this level. It's like, okay, we've got our collective sexual trauma. We need to do that work, and we need to do that work with other than ourselves and our partners. We need help with that. And then beyond the trauma, it's like we need to have fun and play with our sexuality, and recreational sex is something to be celebrated. And maybe that's with, as long as it's with consenting adults, and maybe that the proper energy exchange is money exchange for that. And maybe, for some it's not, but that, not to shame sex for money or anything, like, how we choose to use our bodies and what is the energy exchange. It is illegal, so I don't, practice it or don't condone it until I'm in a country, and there's lots of countries, like when I went to Australia, there's countries where it is legal and you can celebrate it differently. But then after the play, we get into more of the transformational and revelational realms of sexuality, because sex really is medicine, and we can start to use it as prayer and see and experience the magic of it. And those realms could be done, with a professional, in a professional context, or, as Willow brought up on her first date with, just done in, with somebody you meet off Tinder, So, in terms of the legalizing prostitution as an argument, like, I'm all for it. And we have a long way to go in terms of shedding off layers of ignorance, fear, shame around sex before there's an empowerment that we can really kind of responsibly, as a culture, celebrate it. And I say that, I'm speaking of America. As I said, it's different in different countries. But what we do know about any kind of prohibition, whether it's drugs or alcohol, in this case, sex, for money, prohibitions tend to push things into the shadows. And then what'll happen is, the conditions in which people are performing those prohibited acts are not regulated, and lack of regulation leads to, like, STI spreading and, unsafe and secretive behavior. And it just pushes it all into the shadows, as opposed to, a society where, it might be a healthy married couple who, are having a hard time with their sex, and they're like, hey, let's hire somebody to help us, to come in bed and have a threesome and help us out. Or, I'm really not there, and I know your sex drive is higher than mine. Why don't, for your birthday, I, get you a couple of sessions with with a professional, and that way you can run your energy and then come back fulfilled to, the happy household. And those are just not conversations that we see in our current culture, because of the prohibition that creates more repression, and then it becomes a whole shadowy, underbelly black market kind of scene. And I am grateful that a lot of the tantrikas and priests and priestesses have taken it into the light in ways that they have, And there are middle grounds. There's, you know, a lot of high-end escorts that are doing their work very publicly. I mentioned Veronica Monet because she did a lot of wonderful advocacy for normalizing a lot of escorting. And there's other, you know, brilliant leaders and teachers that are making great headway. So yeah, it's a important, fun topic. My friend Michael Ellsberg's writing a book right now on, you know, making a case for doing what you please with your body, making money off of your own sexuality if you choose. And I'll be doing a podcast with him probably next month. Yeah, we'll be just really focusing in on legalizing sex work. Sweet. Well, we're almost at our time. And as always, I really love where the spontaneous conversation takes us. I'm curious, you know, we can kind of wrap up, but if there was any incompletes or if there's any burning shares, I want to hold space for that. So if we're ready to close, I would love to just hear what's the most valuable thing that you got out of our time together in a sentence. And we can just go around and share, whoever wants to go.
As a former Catholic and a spiritual person, I'm both terrified and interested and intrigued. I'm definitely going to buy your book.
Thank you, George. It's wonderful when I meet someone who's stretching themselves. Thanks for showing up. Who's next?
I just want to say I so admire the example that you set. You know, that it's so clear that you're solid and you give from your heart, and it's just such a great thing to see. So really, I learned just by watching you, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. So what specifically did you get at?
I love the sentence, art is a kiss of God. And I just want to say one small thing with all my heart for you and all my reference to you. I would love that you don't say America has a country and prostitution is legalized in Brazil.
Yeah.
And when you say that, I feel, you know, it doesn't feel good in my heart. And
I'm so glad you called me on that, Sarah. I've been trying to shift that and I'm fucking brainwashed here. So
yeah, I know.
My sincere apologies, but you can call me on it a million times and I will get that. That's important to me too. So thank you. Yeah, it's especially as, you know, I'm Mexican, you know, I really care about Latin America and Central America, and it is really myopic for us to say America.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I was really struck by the quote, "You can't defile me." I think, like as a survivor of trauma, that just struck me very deeply. Actually, I wrote it down. I've been taking notes. I just thought it was a beautiful sentence.
Thank you, Ty. Yeah, it's I'm gonna just take an extra moment because I was rocked. Like when I mentioned Tracy Lease, but I've had some other profound mentors, and when I was early on my path, I had a teacher say that a tantrika can't be raped. And that fucking rocked me. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And they gave it to me like a Zen koan. And it was like, meditate on that. And so there's something there for you. You know, I welcome you to just kind of feel into what does that mean? And yeah, along those lines, you can't defile me. Like, you know, when we know our sacredness and the God forces in us, you know, you can piss on the temple altars and that's still sacred waters. Cat!
Or, yeah, so I wanted to pull over so I wouldn't be so loud. When you were talking about the actor who, you know, first is on stage learning about, you know, trying to memorize the lines, and then they have finally got the lines and they're acting pretty well. And it becomes like a muscle memory and they're able to transcend. I'd never heard anything like that. And it was something, it was like so profound and moving. I was like, it almost was kind of bringing tears to my eyes, because it's like hitting on a truth that I can't quite describe, but I've sensed it before. And I guess what it is somehow like using method to tap into the divine, which was a really profound and beautiful thing to hear, that just really moved me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Great reflection.
My brain is filled with tons of as just inspiration is flowing with how to bring sex magic and sacred healing into my life and the world. And my final curiosities are about where I can get this. I don't know if that's a question I can ask now, or maybe message you about schooling of some sort that I can go towards a professional part of this in my life.
Where do you live, Willow?
Dayton, Ohio.
Okay, great.
Well, actually Athens, Ohio now.
Sweet. Thank you. We'll talk.
Yep.
Tommy, did you have any closing notes?
I really resonated when you mentioned Annie DeFranco, and it was good to hear some of her brilliance. I need to learn more of her and read about her. And also, I've probably never told you, I grew up in Nevada, so I've always felt the necessity of legal prostitution. And even though I've been to places that it's allowed, I don't partake. I get more out of the more love. So I don't know. I think it's important to have for those people that can otherwise not connect. And I've seen good come from it. Plenty of guys that just think that's a whole lot easier than getting involved. I love your readings and stuff. It's really cool.
Thank you.
We'll miss you the next couple of weeks.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for showing up, and I'll be back in 2 weeks' time. So we'll see you then. Mwah. Blessings.